I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Abstract Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have a special guest. She's award-winning and best-selling author, no other than Miss Segal. Welcome, Miss Ina on Abstract Essay, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Hey Daniel, and it's nice to see you again.
Yes.
So,
For the second time around.
yes, the second time. So I help people to connect to their soul, to their inner wisdom, to their body. I help them to understand themselves from all different perspectives and directions, both from mental, emotional, physical, as well as spiritual. And so I help them to heal themselves. I help them to discover the language of their body and soul and how it communicates with them. And I help them to grow into the person that they don't even know they are yet, and to deepen into themselves and understand who they really are, as well as awakening their intuition and healing themselves. So many aspects of healing and spirituality, essentially.
Miss Ina Segal, award-winning and best-selling author, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today let's talk about your latest book, Understanding Modern Spirituality. Tell us, your book argues for a new understanding of spirituality. What is the most significant way modern spirituality differs from the traditional organized religions of the past?
What a big question. I feel like part of moving into this modern way of connection is actually asking a lot of questions. So I feel like in the past, people had to just believe whatever they were told and essentially follow whatever that was without questioning. And I know when I was at school, for instance, and we had religious studies, whenever I put up my hand and question and ask something around, what the teacher was uncomfortable about, I would be told to leave the room, or I would be sent to the library, because there was this limitation around asking deeper questions. And so for me, understanding modern spirituality is not so much about ignoring the past as actually bringing what has been there in the past into the present, but questioning things. And by questioning, going deeper and learning more about who we are, as opposed to being told that someone who is, whether they are in church or synagogue or anywhere else, that they have all the answers. I really believe that we are at a place where the answers that are really deep and profound and spiritual can be revealed to us, whoever we are. We don't have to be somebody who's, like I said, in a particular religion and be a priest or somebody at that level. We can all be our own discoverers, and that's essentially what I wrote in Understanding Modern Spirituality, is how to stretch people and ask deeper questions and not just believe anything you've been told or heard.
You've been told and heard. Well, interesting, Miss Ina. In a nutshell, what is the central argument of your book? What do you believe is the key to understanding spirituality in the 21st century?
I really believe that there's several different aspects. It's actually about one, thinking for yourself, but also connecting the different dots and the different pieces together. So rather than saying things like it's all about love, for instance, which is more in the, something that a lot of people talk about maybe in the new age community, actually asking questions about, well, what does that mean? And asking questions and understanding. I talk about, for instance, around the higher beings being angelic beings, archangels, archai, and so on. And I talk about them from the perspective of really looking and understanding and studying, not from somebody who, just channeled information or said, I believe in it, but actually looking both at religious texts and what we discovered about them, but also from the perspective of what is it that they're meant to do. And I guess a lot of this book came about from me being inspired by the work of Rudolf Steiner. And I felt like he lived 100 years ago, and he was this incredible scientist slash clairvoyant slash understood things about medicine, understood homeopathy, understood about how the world was created, so to speak, delved into all the religious books and essentially gave us incredible understandings and insights into what does the Bible really say? What do the Gospels really say? Why are they all different? And so I ended up spending years and years studying Rudolf Steiner's work and being incredibly inspired by what he shared. And then I realized that many, many people will never look at his work because it is very complex and deep and profound. And I wanted to contribute by giving people understandings from my own perspectives on everything, on different topics, everything from what does it mean to be happy? So what does it mean to connect to somebody in your soul group? What does it mean to, when people talk about God, for instance, and they generalize everything and they make everything, they want to skip all the steps about understanding the hierarchy of the angelic realm, and they just go, I don't want to know about this. And I used to be one of these people. I want to have a direct connection to source. I believe I do. And to me, because I had been one of these people who was talking about this, years and years ago and did that, I ended up really becoming very humble by reading and learning Rudolf Steiner's work and actually coming back to the perspective of everything. We need to actually study, we need to understand, we need to ask bigger questions, but we need to be willing to go deeper and not just have instant 5-second answers about things, and actually start to explore every topic and why we have the ability from everything, from ability to talk, ability to think. I start the book with understanding about happiness, because that's a question my daughter has asked me since she was a young girl, and she would say, Mum, are you happy? And I wouldn't just answer her. I would sit with that and I would say, I'm not happy in that la la la, I'm just joyful, happy no matter what state. I'm fulfilled in my life because I actually take time to slow down and reflect and dissect things and digest them, kind of emotionally and mentally. And so I'm deeply fulfilled in terms of my life experience, but I wouldn't say that I'm, that just happy all the time. So this book goes into all of these types of questions.
Messina, how do you define spirituality itself in the way that is inclusive of both religious and non-religious individuals today?
I feel like this is why when I'm teaching people, I'm always asking them that question of what does it mean to you now to connect to the divine? So what it means for me now to what it meant 20 years ago is so completely different. And what I encourage people is to learn and to ask questions. So, for instance, I don't see myself as a religious person, but I have a very strong and deep belief in Christ Jesus. But I also believe that Jesus was a man, a physical person that was here on earth, and Christ was a God that came down to earth. And this is definitely based on all the deep dives and explorations that I've spent the last 11 years working with from Rudolf Steiner's work. And he talks about how when Jesus, for instance, was 30, his sense of self, his sense of I am left, and the Christ being, who is a God, came into his body and surrounded him and into his aura. And to me, that is so profound. And I feel like in religion, there's so many limitations, but there's also an opportunity for people to go, I have faith and I have a connection and I feel something. And ideally people ask questions that they never used to ask, like I said, and they start to delve beyond just the generalizations that are being told to them. And then people who are not religious, I really encourage them also to not just look into the popular authors or new age books, but actually ask let me explore who are the people that talked and wrote about spirituality and higher beings, not based on the fact that they were just channeling this information, but actually based on research, actually based on knowledge and understanding. And I guess that's why I was so inspired personally by the work of Rudolf Steiner, because I wouldn't consider myself a religious person. I went to some religious schools, but I'm not a religious person. I'm much more a spiritual person, but I'm a person who wants to know details and who asks a lot of different questions and then learns about them and sits with them and allows more questions to come through. And so this is, I guess that's what my book, Understanding Modern Spirituality, is about. It's about stretching, exploring, asking questions, and being inspired to go deeper into who am I as a person, and understanding. And part of that is also understanding more about ourselves, understanding that we have a soul, we have a spirit, and they're not the same parts of us. We have subtle bodies. We have a physical body, obviously, that we are all aware of, but we have an etheric body, we have an astral body, and I talk about that in Understanding Modern Spirituality. We also have an ego body. And so much of what people have learned may also be from the past. So a lot of people believe, because they've been told that ego is bad, for instance, and then we need to dissolve the ego. We need to, we need to have no desires. And I believe that was really important 2000 years ago, where we had an Eastern kind of an Indian civilization that, sorry, not 2000, thousands of years ago, more like 8 or 9,000, where we had, when at different times we have different civilizations that are guiding humanity. And so, about 8 or 9,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, we had an Indian civilization that was kind of in charge of guidance. And this is where this whole idea of, let's say, dissolving the ego came in, because at that time, you could not actually enter into the spiritual world with the type of ego that people had. And one of the things that people don't understand often, or don't even think about, is that as we evolved, there's different parts of our soul that evolved, different parts of ourselves evolved, so that right now we have completely different aspects of our inner self. Like, our ego is much more awakened, our soul is much more awakened than 10,000 years ago, but awakened in a different way to what happened 10,000 years ago. So we had different abilities and capacities. And so when we actually understand things from more of a historical perspective, then we can decide for ourselves how we connect to spirituality and what it really means to us, and how essentially spirituality is about how you think, feel, and live in your life. But you can only really and truly do that more, and I believe more in this day and age, by understanding these things, understanding yourself.
Understanding yourself for sure. So, Miss Ina, as award-winning and best-selling author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question?
What will be your short-term and long-term goals?
My short-term and long-term goals. My short-term goals at the moment is I'm writing another book. And so this one is about understanding different stages of healing that we experience and go through. So actually finishing this book and having it edited and kind of going out into the world. My short-term goals is also about continuing to teach and have both free masterclasses in terms of teaching and workshops that people can come into and explore. And then my long term is also to continue to teach, but also to I'm really, really enjoying being on podcasts and sharing information. And so I feel like long term, I want to just keep going onto different podcasts and sharing different perspectives and different knowledge that I have, and I'm always learning. So essentially connecting to more people and inspiring more people to delve deeper, whether it's in their own spirituality or their own emotions or understanding their body and healing themselves.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Ina, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be award-winning and best-selling author too, like you?
I feel like you need to take your time with writing and rewriting. And you need to be really passionate about your topic and be willing to research it and sit with it, and also figure out what have people shared already, what have they written about, and how can you do it differently, how can you add something to it. And I also ask people, I feel like it's really important to be proactive as well. And because a lot of people think that writing a book is all that there is. So you write a book, you finish it, and then it's out there. There's so many steps and stages. There's the step of writing it and having it edited, and not just trying to rush through it using AI, because people can tell when you do that, but actually slow it down and take your time and bring out your best work, and bring something new, like I said, to it. But then finding the right publisher for me was really important, and somebody who supports you. And I have many publishers around the world, so I've been very fortunate to work with different ones, and actually communicating with them about how are you going to get your book out there, how are you going to promote it so that people can actually hear you and see you, which is part of me being on your show, Daniel, is doing that. And so having some kind of step-by-step process of what you're going to do. Are you going to go to the bookshops? I know when my book, The Secret Language of Your Body, first came out and nobody had heard of me or knew me, I was, contacting bookshops, going to bookshops, doing book signings, doing talks, doing tours, making sure that people could find my book, and encouraging people to share the book if they found it useful and helpful, asking people to do reviews. And so I just feel like this is the way, is to write it, but then to look at the whole journey.
Well, thank you for that advice, Miss Ina. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Oh, so many. So many
Lots.
influenced my journey, but I think for me the book that really opened the doors for me towards exploring spirituality in a different way was called Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner. And when I read that book, I felt like so many kind of light bulbs went off in my head, and I found it fascinating. It's not the easiest book to read, and it's not the easiest at the start, but it kind of blew my mind. And I remember underlining. I usually try not to do that too much with books, but underlining and making notes besides it so that I come back to it and reread it and go, oh, okay, now that I've learned more, I understand even more. And so I guess, that's probably the book that I've come back to the most in the last 10 years at least.
Miss Ina, before we wrap up our discussion for today, and thank you for that recommended book. And I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, a comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101 love letters in the third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Ina, if your book successfully helps someone understand modern spirituality, what change do you hope to see in their life and their view of the world?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like everything in their view of the world will change, how they live on a daily basis, what they focus on. One of the reasons that I really wanted to write this book originally was that after a conversation I had with my mom, and I just felt like my mom was constantly focused on stressing about money, or about getting things done, or about me or my brother or my children, and she was always worrying in life. And I said to her, do you have other thoughts and beliefs? And, if we got to a place where you were literally at your deathbed, do you believe that worrying about everything would help you? Like, what would you actually take into the spiritual world from here? That would be useful. And I can tell you that worry is not useful. I want you to start to connect to life in a different way and ask deeper questions and focus on what does it mean for me how do I wake up every day? Do I connect to something higher? Do I do a prayer? Do I do a meditation? Like, I have meditated and done pretty much very similar type meditations for the last 11 years, pretty much every single day. And I feel like I need to do it to connect. How I look at life is based on understanding spirituality, that even though there are struggles and there's war at different places, and there's conflict and death, I see how all of these from perspectives that are understanding spirituality, understanding our soul's journey, understanding what happens when we pass over and go into the spiritual world. So we've just had, my partner and I have just lost somebody very close to us. And rather than, for me personally, going into huge feeling of loss, which, I think is also normal, I'm actually connecting to this person from the perspective of, how can their spiritual journey be the most empowering one? And how do we support and help this person on that journey? And so I just feel like you focus differently in your life. You stop focusing on things that are so temporary, and you start to focus on things that are you'll understand are much more important in your life, and developing parts of your own self, strengthening different parts of yourself, and just becoming a much deeper, more awake person. So many, many things change. Everything, essentially, how you experience your daily life changes.
Miss Ina Senegal, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. So I really encourage people to go to my website, inasegal.com, and ideally actually look up and participate in my masterclasses. But so the easiest way to do that is to go inasegal.com/masterclass and give yourself 4 hours, get a journal, and really start to connect and ask these deeper questions. And there's also processes that you can do in that particular masterclass, and that will give you much more insight into my work and what I really teach and talk about. So that's a great way to start.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Ina Senegal, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Miss Ina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.